On a warm Sunday afternoon in December 2003, the peaceful suburb of Palm Woods on Australia's Sunshine Coast became the starting point of what would develop into one of the country's most extensive missing persons investigations. The events that unfolded would ultimately transform child safety awareness across the nation, though they began in the most ordinary of circumstances. The Morecombe family home in Palm Woods, Queensland, was a place of simple pleasures and close family bonds. Bruce and Denise Morecombe were parents to three boys, twins, Daniel and Bradley, and their older brother, Dean. The family enjoyed an uncomplicated lifestyle surrounded by the natural beauty of Australia's Sunshine Coast. Daniel James Morecombe was described by his father as a shy young boy around strangers, but energetic and enthusiastic with his family. He was well-mannered, reliable, and had an affinity for animals and outdoor activities. His dream was to become a veterinarian someday. Daniel possessed a generous spirit and genuine concern for others, traits his parents deeply admired. On December 7th, 2003, 13-year-old Daniel had planned a shopping trip to the Sunshine Plaza Shopping Center. His intention was to purchase Christmas presents for his family and get a haircut. Before leaving, Daniel had asked both his brothers to accompany him, but each had other commitments and declined. This ordinary decision would later weigh heavily on their minds. Daniel set off alone, walking to a bus stop located just half a kilometer from his home. The bus route was one he had taken many times before in an area he knew intimately. He was expected to catch the 1:35 p.m. bus, but that vehicle had experienced mechanical issues. At approximately 2:10 p.m., witnesses observed Daniel still waiting patiently beneath the overpass. Eventually, a replacement bus drove past, but did not stop for Daniel as it was already behind schedule. The driver radioed the depot to arrange for another driver to collect the waiting passenger. When a second bus arrived a few minutes later, the bus stop was empty. Daniel Morecombe had vanished. As afternoon transitioned into evening on that December day, concern began to grow within the Morecombe household. Around 4:15 p.m., Daniel's family realized he should have returned hours earlier. His brothers confirmed they had been out with friends and had not seen him. Denise Morecombe decided to walk the route to the bus stop herself. During her search, she discovered the broken-down bus being loaded onto a tow truck, but there was no sign of her son. Upon contacting the bus company, they confirmed that no one matching Daniel's description had been picked up that day. The following morning, just after 7:30 a.m., police were formally notified of Daniel's disappearance. Soon after, the first images of the young teenager began appearing in media outlets. A coordinated search effort quickly formed with approximately 50 state emergency service volunteers and rescue helicopters scouring the surrounding area, though nothing of significance was discovered. The search expanded to include waterways and dams, with police divers examining bodies of water, while volunteers searched through grasslands. The community response was overwhelming, with hundreds of people offering assistance and support. Daniel's parents and brothers joined nearly 400 people at a vigil. Bruce and Denise Morecombe soon became familiar faces in the media, consistently appealing for information and ensuring Daniel's image and details were widely distributed. December 19th marked a particularly difficult milestone for the family. Daniel's 14th birthday passed without him present. Authorities organized a reenactment of the events leading to Daniel's disappearance, hoping to stimulate the memories of motorists who might have traveled along that road on the day he vanished. As days turned into weeks, his parents' public appeals grew more urgent. "We both want Daniel home," they expressed during one media appearance. "It's been 7 days since he was last seen. It's a matter of urgency. Somebody must have seen him somewhere. It's getting desperate. We need him back. We want Daniel back." Several witnesses came forward with recollections of seeing Daniel at the bus stop on that December afternoon. Some reported observing him drawing patterns in the mud with a stick to occupy himself while waiting. Others described seeing him standing near a man who was leaning against a wall behind the bus stop. This individual was depicted as gaunt in appearance with a goatee beard and visible tattoo. Multiple witnesses corroborated this description. By carefully assembling the various time frames provided by witnesses, investigators determined that Daniel's disappearance had occurred within an extraordinarily brief 90-second window. To generate additional leads, authorities placed life-sized clay models at the location, one representing Daniel and another portraying the unidentified man seen near him. This visual reconstruction proved effective, generating over 300 tips within just a few days. Among these reports were accounts of a suspicious white vehicle seen circulating in the area that afternoon. By March 2004, Crime Stoppers had logged more than 3,000 calls related to the case, the highest number for any investigation in the organization's history. The following months saw numerous community events organized to maintain awareness. Over 50 printing companies collaborated to produce nearly 2 million informational leaflets about Daniel. His image was also printed on milk bottles distributed throughout the region. By October of that year, the number of tips received had reached 8,000, and authorities announced a $250,000 reward, the largest in Queensland's history. In 2005, Bruce and Denise established the Daniel Morecombe Foundation. Initially conceived as a means to maintain attention on their son's case, the foundation evolved to provide support and educational resources for parents, educators, and caregivers, promoting awareness about child safety. As months transformed into years, Daniel's story continued to receive media coverage, and the foundation worked diligently to keep his name in public consciousness. Despite the nearly 10,000 tips collected, investigators still lacked sufficient evidence to resolve the case. At one point, more than 500 persons of interest were under consideration. 4 years after Daniel's disappearance, the Morecombe family made the difficult decision to relocate from their home. Until that time, Daniel's possessions had remained untouched, exactly as he had left them on that December day, preserved in the hope he might someday return. Bruce and Denise Morecombe persistently followed every potential lead, regardless of where it might take them. Bruce even initiated his own investigative efforts, interviewing registered sex offenders in the area who claimed to possess relevant information, though these inquiries yielded nothing substantive. As time passed, there was growing concern that Daniel's case might never be resolved. However, his parents remained determined. They requested an inquest into his disappearance, hoping that the extensive list of persons of interest would receive renewed scrutiny. The inquest was approved and included testimony from the bus driver, who had initially passed by Daniel witnesses who had observed the unidentified man near the bus stop, and numerous persons of interest. Thousands of pages of investigative materials were submitted to the state coroner. By this time, authorities had concluded that Daniel had likely been killed shortly after his abduction, and the search had shifted toward locating his remains Among those called to testify under oath was 41-year-old Brett Peter Cowan. Cowan had been known to police and had been under consideration since the initial stages of the investigation. He had been interviewed just 2 weeks after Daniel's disappearance, and investigators acknowledged there were inconsistencies in his alibi from the beginning. During his testimony, Cowan provided an account of his activities on December 7, 2003. He claimed to have been gardening that morning and cutting down trees in the afternoon. Around lunchtime, he said he had contacted his employer's father to borrow equipment, then collected it around 1:30 p.m. and returned home approximately 45 minutes later. When questioned about the possibility that he hadn't arrived home until 3:00 p.m., creating a gap in his timeline, Cowan appeared evasive. The most disturbing aspect of Cowan's testimony emerged when he stated that there was no possibility he could have abducted Daniel because his preference was for children between 6 and 8 years old, suggesting Daniel at 13 was too old for him. As the inquest proceeded, Cowan's previous criminal history was revealed. In 1987, when Cowan was 18 years old, he had assaulted a 7-year-old boy named Tim at a daycare center where Cowan worked. After attempting to lure the child into a bathroom and being refused, Cowan forcibly took Tim into a cubicle and subjected him to a serious sexual assault. During the attack, Cowan strangled the boy and threatened to kill him if he ever disclosed what had happened. The assault only ended when another staff member called out for Tim. Tim later expressed that while he had physically survived the ordeal, he felt that Cowan had nevertheless taken his life that day. Following his arrest for this assault, Cowan was granted bail, but fled remaining at large for 2 years before being apprehended in New South Wales. During the subsequent trial, Tim courageously testified against his attacker and recalled that Cowan maintained a smile throughout the proceedings as though treating the entire matter as some form of amusement. Cowan received a 2-year sentence, but served less than 12 months before being released. After his release, Cowan relocated to Darwin, presenting himself as a Reformed Christian who had found religious faith. However, not long afterward, he attacked another child, a 6-year-old whom he abducted from a trailer park. After assaulting the child, Cowan left him in the trunk of a burned-out vehicle, apparently assuming he would not survive. Remarkably, the young victim managed to escape and make his way to a nearby service station. The child had suffered a broken collarbone, a punctured lung, and hemorrhaging in his eyes from attempted suffocation. Cowan was eventually apprehended and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment, of which he served 4. Psychological assessments of Cowan identified him as a pathological liar, with mild psychopathy and a profound lack of empathy. The severity of his crimes against children and the trauma they caused suggested that recidivism was likely. At the conclusion of his testimony regarding Daniel's disappearance, Cowan looked directly at Bruce and Denise Morecombe and stated, "I had nothing to do with Daniel's disappearance, nothing at all." Following Cowan's testimony, and with a new task force assembled, the investigation took a decisive turn. Authorities initiated an extensive undercover operation that would continue for 4 months, designed to determine whether Cowan was responsible for Daniel's abduction and presumed death. The investigation employed what is known as the Mr. Big technique, a complex strategy involving the creation of a fictitious criminal organization using undercover officers. The objective was to gradually integrate the suspect into this fabricated criminal network. As the suspect believes they are advancing within the organization's hierarchy, they eventually meet Mr. Big, ostensibly the leader of the group, but actually a police interrogator. During this meeting, the suspect is typically offered a higher position contingent upon passing an interview, during which they are encouraged to disclose their past activities. An undercover officer, posing as a member of this fictional criminal group, befriended Cowan while on a flight to Perth, marking the beginning of the operation. The officer mentioned connections to a powerful criminal organization and suggested substantial financial opportunities, which immediately captured Cowan's interest. Over the subsequent months, Cowan was gradually integrated into the group's activities, participating in simulated drug transactions, collecting fictitious debts, and handling counterfeit weapons. Eventually, Cowan was informed that the organization's leadership considered him ready to meet the person in charge. This meeting took place in a hotel room equipped with recording devices. The undercover officer, an experienced interrogator, began a conversation with Cowan. Surprisingly, Cowan began to disclose information relatively quickly. The officer expressed concern about rumors regarding Cowan's involvement in the Daniel Morcombe case, suggesting that while this did not personally trouble him, he needed to understand what measures might be necessary to protect the organization, such as arranging alibis or removing evidence. Cowan then provided a detailed confession. He described seeing Daniel waiting at the bus stop and making a circular drive around the area. Noticing a broken-down bus nearby, Cowan realized Daniel would not be picked up soon. He parked his vehicle in a nearby lot, then positioned himself behind Daniel, pretending to also be waiting for transportation. While monitoring the surroundings to ensure minimal witnesses, Cowan saw his opportunity when the replacement bus passed without stopping. According to his confession, Cowan drove Daniel approximately 30 minutes away to an isolated property. Daniel's parents later reflected that their son must have recognized the seriousness of his situation as the surroundings became increasingly remote and unfamiliar. Cowan stated that after taking Daniel into a house on the property, the boy became frightened and attempted to escape. Cowan then strangled him. Based on this account and expert opinions, investigators concluded that Daniel had been killed within an hour of his abduction. Afterward, Cowan disposed of the body down an embankment and discarded the clothing in a creek. Following Cowan's confession, the undercover operatives convinced him to show them the location where he had disposed of Daniel's body, suggesting they could help remove any remaining evidence. They traveled to a wooded area 70 kilometers north of Brisbane, with police officers concealed nearby. As Cowan ventured deeper into the woodland, officers emerged and placed him under arrest for the murder of Daniel Morcombe. Cowan was taken into custody and charged with murder, abduction, deprivation of liberty, indecent treatment of a child under 16, and interfering with human remains. A week later in the area, Cowan had identified, investigators discovered a shoe. This was followed by the recovery of shorts, a belt, and damaged underwear. Eventually, 3 human bones were located. DNA comparison with samples from Daniel's toothbrush confirmed these remains belonged to Daniel Morcombe. The search of the area continued for 3 months, ultimately yielding 17 bones in total. It would be approximately 1 year before Daniel's remains were released to his family for burial, almost 9 years after his disappearance. More than 2,000 people attended his funeral, demonstrating the community's enduring support for the family. The investigation into Daniel's disappearance had become one of the most extensively pursued criminal cases in Queensland's history, and its conclusion brought a measure of resolution, albeit under tragic circumstances. A court order removed the name suppression that had previously concealed Cowan's identity following a request from Daniel's parents. Bruce Morcom later reflected that once Cowan was arrested, the circumstances became clearer. I felt he was a remarkably simple person to identify, and this was a simple puzzle to solve, Bruce observed. He had a huge hole in his alibi and a disgraceful record. Brett Peter Cowan pleaded not guilty to all charges related to Daniel Morcom's abduction and death. The trial lasted 1 month and included testimony from 116 witnesses with more than 200 exhibits presented as evidence. Cowan chose not to testify in his own defense. On March 14, 2014, more than a decade after Daniel's disappearance, the jury delivered its verdict. Cowan was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 20 years. He displayed no emotional reaction as the verdict was announced. This judgment concluded what had become the largest police investigation in Queensland's history, and at that time, the most extensive missing persons case in Australia. Denise Morcom later shared that as the verdict was delivered, she recalled the promise she had made to her son that she would secure justice for him, and she felt profound relief that this commitment had been fulfilled. She added that as a family, they valued keeping their promises, and her first wish afterward was to visit Daniel's resting place to inform him they had not failed him. Cowan subsequently attempted to appeal his conviction, but this request was denied. He remains incarcerated at Woolston Correctional Center, where he has reportedly experienced several physical attacks from other inmates. According to prison sources, Cowan maintains respectful behavior towards staff, though this is attributed to his understanding that officers represent his only protection from other prisoners. Following Cowan's sentencing, Denise Morcom expressed that she finally felt able to process Daniel's belongings and address emotions she had compartmentalized for many years. The case profoundly influenced child safety practices throughout Australia, and the dedication shown by Daniel's family inspired many across the nation. The Daniel Morcom Foundation, established by Bruce and Denise, has evolved into one of Australia's most recognized non-profit organizations dedicated to child safety. Bruce and Denise view the foundation as a way to reciprocate the support they received from the community during their search for answers. Each year, thousands of people wear red clothing, the color Daniel was last seen wearing, during an annual National Day of Action for Child Safety. This event, known as Day for Daniel, is held on the last Friday of October and represents Australia's largest educational initiative for child safety awareness and conversation. The day begins with a 4-kilometer walk symbolizing the journey home that Daniel was unable to complete. Parents, caregivers, and educators are encouraged to discuss personal safety with children and young people. Schools' early learning centers, businesses, and communities participate in activities to raise awareness. Bruce and Denise also met with Tim Cowan's first known victim to assure him that Cowan would never harm another person. Daniel's twin brother Bradley honored his memory at his wedding, with his older brother Dean serving as best man carrying photographs of Daniel so he could be symbolically present. Bradley later welcomed a son whose middle name is Daniel. Dean also had a daughter, coincidentally born on the same day that Day for Daniel was observed. The Morcom family continues to reserve a seat for Daniel at their Christmas table each year, with his photograph placed beside his chair. Through these gestures and through the Foundation's ongoing work, They ensure that Daniel's memory endures and that his name continues to be associated with helping others. The story of Daniel Morcombe remains a testament to a family's unwavering commitment to truth and justice, and to a community's capacity to support those experiencing profound loss. Through their dedication, Daniel's legacy has transcended tragedy to become a catalyst for positive change in child safety awareness across Australia.